Interesting hour coming up. Chris Cuomo, take it away. It's all yours.
That's the job, my friend. Chris Cuomo here. Welcome to NewsNation, where we are working to keep the facts straight. And that's enough. Is Social Security on the chopping block? No question that would be a political pitfall, but let's take a look at the facts and how they're being twisted, okay? By way of illustration about Social Security, look at another entitlement, Medicaid. President Trump promised to keep entitlements intact, but his party is actively eyeing cuts to the Medicaid safety net, dangling Trump's desire to extend his tax cuts and the necessary fiscal adjustments, like raising the debt ceiling that would be necessary, as leverage. Now, we'll see how that plays out. But now there's reason to believe the administration is eyeing Social Security as well. Reminder. Social Security payments to around 70 million old, injured Americans and their dependents, okay? There are multiple programs. We all pay into it. You see it on every pay stub. And the need for them is great. There's also this addition from the 80s called the trust fund. President Reagan put it in to create this kind of cushion of extra payroll tax input that would be put into the fund that exceeded the needs to help pay off over time when the needs increased. Controversial. Why? Some say he did it just to have another pocket to tap for spending. All right. Now, one of the things this sounds like a boring digression. It isn't. And I'll tell you why in a second, because Musk is making comments about this now that you need to understand. All that trust fund does is buy treasuries, which does allow the government more revenue to use in spending. But I digress. I'll get back to it. Trump has promised not to cut Social Security, but there are flagrant, fact-free attacks coming from his favorite proxy, Mr. Musk. So let's set the record straight. Musk first claimed that millions of people are fraudulently collecting Social Security. He put out that data showing that millions of people on the Social Security rolls were aged 150 and older. This was at best absurdly ignorant and potentially a planned deception. Here's the fact. Only about 90,000 retirees, 99 and older, get Social Security, not millions. Okay? That's the fact. He's wrong. Now, once this gross error was exposed, Musk backed off until he didn't. Then he goes to the administration's favorite digital megaphone, the Joe Rogan podcast, to peddle another frontal assault on Social Security, saying it's a Ponzi scheme.
Social Security is the biggest Ponzi scheme of all time.
Right, explain that.
Oh, so, people pay into Social Security, and the money goes out of Social Security immediately. Have you ever looked at the debt clock?
Yes.
Okay. There's our present day debt, but then there's our future obligations. So when you look at the future obligations of Social Security, the actual national debt is like double what people think it is because of the future obligations.
No, not it's, wait, Social Security isn't part of our debt structure? I mean, look, I know Musk is a genius. I'm not saying he isn't, but I also think, if you're a parent, how like there are different kinds of intelligence with your kids. Some are really good quantitatively, but they have like a lousy EQ, their emotional quotient. Maybe Musk is great at some things, but he doesn't know government very well, okay? What he just said and what Rogan went to is demonstrably false. It's just wrong. Rogan sat there and listened because he doesn't do this job, which is why Musk went there in the first place, like many others do, to not get pushback and to put out ideas to tens of millions of people that will now become conventional BS wisdom, okay? And Rogan knows Musk has been wrong about this program in the past. How do we know? He admitted it.
Now they're talking about Social Security.
Yeah.
And that people are receiving Social Security that are 150 years old. But I don't think that is the reality as it's being explained by people who understand COBOL, the language. But it doesn't even necessarily mean that all these people are receiving checks.
Right. They're just listed on the files.
Right.
And it doesn't mean money's going out to them. And so, again, from a messaging perspective, does Elon need to screenshot that and then send it out as a tweet or whatever we call X nowadays? And then suddenly you've got, a couple million people going, oh my God, we're paying dead people. Well,
right. That's the problem with being hyperbolic.
Yeah, that is the problem with being hyperbolic, and you just let him do it again. You needed that other guy at the table, okay? The trust fund is borrowed by government, sometimes to be used on spending. You can debate that. But the idea that Social Security is what's ballooning our debt is demonstrably false. It's not how it works. So why did he just sit there? I don't know. Why did he submit to Musk's mendacity? I don't know. I honestly believe that there is an excitement among a certain part of the population to be part of the everything sucks crusade. Let's just tear it all down. But I'm going to tell you something. Any jackass can kick down a barn. It takes a good man or woman to make one better. And I think they're really heavy on the kick it down part and really light on the making things better. The response to the claim is simple. I just gave you the part about the debt, okay? Social Security is not a Ponzi scheme. One is a scam. The other has worked for generations. Musk is twisting the reality that Social Security is a pay-as-you-go system, meaning what you know it means. Workers now pay in for the benefits of the retirees who paid in for those who retired before them. A Ponzi scheme, which in deference to Italians should now be called a Madoff scheme. He ripped off many more than Ponzi did with the same technique. Those schemes take new investors' money, pay off old investors. Scam collapses when the new investors realize there's no there, right? It's just fraud. Social Security is not going to just suddenly collapse in the future. There will always be more workers in the future to pay retirees on top of the trust fund. Now, instead of it's rigged, it sucks, Musk, the alleged genius, better ideas guy, could argue the program needs to be adjusted to deal with growing obligations, because it does. There are more people retiring than entering the workforce to pay the retirees. Another reason immigration matters. The CBO estimates the trust fund will get depleted by 2035 unless there are fixes. And here's the good news. There are a lot of obvious fixes that have been suggested for decades. In fact, this was the first media work I did 25 plus years ago, researching Social Security fixes for Generation X. The most obvious one would be to allow more income to be exposed to these payroll taxes. Right now, the income that is exposed to the tax is capped at $175,000 a year. Anything over that is exempt. This is not a radical idea. Why? Because we already do this with Medicare. There's no cap on the earnings there. And that's why that program is more stable. Not perfect, but more stable. If the government expanded, let's say, the cap to $400,000 instead of $175,000, the trust fund would be solvent for a long time. There are many other obvious ideas to address the upcoming concerns, but these guys seem more interested in just saying how everything's going to get worse. And to help it along, they're making it worse. Trump is laying off 12% of the Social Security Administration's workforce when they are already understaffed and experiencing an onslaught of new beneficiaries. That is not going to make the program any better unless what your goal is to prove that it's bad. I don't know. It's very sinister, very dark. Hope it's not true. Experts say cutting this way is going to affect the 70 million who need the benefits. Certainly, a genius like Musk should be able to think of even more solutions, right? Though his nonsense suggestion that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, on top of his gross miscalculations about who gets benefits, added to his Doge savings getting cut to a fraction of what he boasted when it was revealed they were getting the programs and the count wrong. And of course, his apparent misunderstanding not only of how our debt works, but of how judicial review works in the Constitution as a check on the executive. Again, I'm not saying he's not a genius, but maybe he's a genius in other ways, not in like the knowing history or civics way. Unless, of course, it's not that he doesn't know. He does know that the federal courts get to review executive orders. And that he isn't just getting calculations wrong when he's a math genius, but that he's intentionally trying to undermine your faith in our government. That is a much darker suggestion. And I hope it's not true. But all I know for now is that what he's saying about Social Security is demonstrably false and clearly designed to undermine confidence in the program, not to make it better. I don't know how you make America anything greater than she already is by destroying one of our society's signature safety nets. You want to make it better? You want to change it? Great. But just trashing everything? Is that what we voted for? Is that what you voted for? So let's keep the facts straight and see where the ideas are for making anything better. Again, it's easy to kick down a barn. It's hard to make one better. So we're not just seeing this with Social Security. I see the same toxic dynamic in Ukraine, the dynamic there. Is Trump wrong to put pressure on Zelensky? Of course not. It's his call as president of the United States. They are wholly dependent on us. And he wants that war to end, and they have to play a role in that. And he is frustrated by what Zelensky did in the Oval Office and not being on bended knee. Okay. Now, what is his reaction? Clearly, Zelensky has not done what you have to do with Trump if you want to get him back at the table, which is, you may not like that that's what it takes. That's what it takes. And until that happens, Trump's going to do what he does. He's going to make things harder. Okay? So, what do we know? What is going to happen right now is that they are going to turn the screws on Ukraine. Okay? What they're going to do right now is slow down aid and maybe cut aid. We have sound of the president saying just that.
Now, maybe somebody doesn't want to make a deal. And if somebody doesn't want to make a deal, I think that person won't be around very long. That person will not be listened to very long. Because I believe that Russia wants to make a deal. I believe certainly the people of Ukraine want to make a deal. They've suffered more than anybody else.
Now, I know a lot of people are trashing the president. But look, this is a political judgment, and it's his to make, okay? I may not agree with it, but I'm not the president. But I do think that the facts need contextualizing here. Why was the United States in support of Ukraine? Because Russia isn't looking to just protect against NATO. It wants to expand. It has made that clear time and time again. And remember, nobody thought this more than Trump's party. Okay? And when Ukraine was invaded by Russia, what happened? You guys were all into it. There were yellow and blue flags all over the place, led by Republicans. Biden was in power, but they were all about it. Then Trump comes back in, and what? We get reminded that he hates Zelensky because of that stupid phone call that led to a second impeachment. And his party had to turn tail because that's what they have to do if they don't want to get primaried. But this idea that Ukraine is a country with a culture and history of corruption is true. This idea that America interfered with a democratically elected government to install its own puppet is not true. The former president, which was actually a dictatorship, was Russia's puppet, Viktor Yanukovych. And Zelensky came in as part of the rejection movement to that puppet regime when he went back to Russia, hint, hint. When Yanukovych went back to Russia, hint, hint. They had the election, and Zelensky won on a reform ticket. That's just the truth. So, I have a guest tonight who absolutely knows the president very well, was instrumental in the first campaign that won for Donald Trump. He also knows a lot about the history of Ukraine in recent years, including former President Yanukovych. Paul Manafort. You remember him as the campaign chair for Trump. Worked wonders for him in the convention and beyond, and he joins us now. It's good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, Chris.
So,
I don't want to get in. I don't want to get into history,
Go ahead, Paul.
but I think instead of going back to 2014, which is it was just what you were citing historically, I think we should just focus on the last couple of months, because really, even though I disagree with you on the way you define the last 10 years in Ukraine, it's really the last 6 weeks that matter. Because in the last 6 weeks,
I'm fine with that.
As you said, the game changed. You've got a new president, but there's a lot of intricacies that erupted last Friday, and it's important to know that President Trump has said to the Europeans, and he said to Zelensky, they all have a role in the negotiations. But he said he is going to step in first and use his position of authority and leverage to get a serious conversation going. And he sent out General Kellogg to Ukraine. General Kellogg has met with all the politicians in Ukraine. He's met with but not just Zelensky, but his staff. Spent a lot of time explaining Trump's thinking to them, so they're well aware of his thinking. You got the Europeans who feel like they've been shunted aside, and they don't like sitting on the sidelines. But at the same time, if you ask the Europeans, "What's your solution for peace?" they don't have one. Right. And so last week when Zelensky came to Washington, he was told before he came, look, this is the first step of a process in Trump's negotiation strategy. And he was said, you don't need to even come to Washington. You can have just sign this minerals agreement in Kiev. Zelensky stressed no, he wanted to come. He was warned it probably was not a good idea. Get the deal signed. Trump was meeting with President Macron. He was meeting with the Prime Minister of UK last week before Zelensky came into town, and he was working with them on the whole concept of a peacekeeping force, not a military force, a peacekeeping force. And so Zelensky was going to come in, sign the minerals agreement. Next week, they go to Europe. They were going to announce the peacekeeping portion of the strategy, and Trump was going to then move towards getting a meeting with Putin to start the discussions. And the issue that was of contention was Zelensky wanted security guarantees. If he couldn't have NATO, he wanted security guarantees. But security guarantees can be either a deal-killing solution, or it can be a salve to solve the problem. And Trump said you don't lead with that. You put that in its right context. Trump had a plan. He's the only one that had a plan. He had a strategy. Zelensky came to Washington, and when he came to Washington, he violated the commitment that he had made to Kellogg that he would save any disagreements on the strategy for the lunch afterwards and for private conversations. And the minerals agreement would get signed. And Trump believes, and it was clearly communicated to Zelensky, that the minerals agreement brings the U.S. into the game in a way that the U.S. is not now. Yeah. And that will be leverage for Trump as the negotiator to do what he needs to do. Well, and so when Zelensky blew the deal up,
with American interests. No, I get it. I agree with your analysis, Paul.
But here's where the problem came. All right, one more piece, Chris, and then anything you want to ask.
Go ahead.
Here's where the problem came. Zelensky sat with the Democrats on the Hill before he went to the White House, and they got him all juiced up. Because the Democrats weren't looking for peace. They were looking for a political issue, because they've been frustrated for the last 6 weeks that Trump has been implementing his campaign promises, having a job approval rating grow up, and they don't know how to deal with it. And so they used a campaign tactic instead of diplomacy in dealing with Zelensky, and he came into that meeting and blew the agreement. And that's the problem we have today. Now, the reality is, so now I won't filibuster.
You are filibustering, and I can't get over the fact that we're wearing the same thing, but yours looks better than mine. And the reason
you look good tonight.
I asked you to come on tonight, the reason I asked you to come on was you have an understanding of the culture in Ukraine. I think one of the things that Zelensky's getting painted with is, hey, where'd all the money go? Now, as we both know, a lot of our money goes missing when we give it to other countries, especially when they're in a bad way. Okay, Ukraine's not special in that way. And in fact, they may be kind of on par if you do the numbers legitimately about how much is missing. But do you believe that's Zelensky's fault? Do you think he's dirty?
Well, that isn't the issue. The issue is Zelensky is imperial. And what's happened Oh, yeah, as you know, his term in office has expired. He's a martial law president, and that's fine. I mean, that's a legitimate position to be in. But he doesn't. His popularity in Ukraine is not very high. There are other forces in Ukraine that are just as much pro-Ukraine, anti-Russia, who would probably beat Zelensky in a campaign once the martial law expires. Zelensky survives by having a country at war. I'm not saying he likes war, but he survives by having a country at war. And so it's in his interest to find ways to stop the fighting, but not necessarily reach a peace right away until he can get strengthened politically.
Do you think that Trump pulls all aid for real or as a pressure tactic to get him to say, I'm sorry, and follow Trump's lead?
It's purely a pressure tactic. Mm-hmm. It's not for real. And he even implied that when he said, maybe I'll just do that. Look, this is a very important time in the peace negotiation process. Putin is ready to come to the table. Now, I'm not saying there's a deal on the table, but Putin is ready to come to the table because Putin knows he has to come to the table with this new president. Yeah, and Trump knows that. And Trump has a plan. And again, he's explained it to Zelensky. He's explained it to the Europeans. They each have their pieces in it. They're just not on the front end. But they want it their way. And Zelensky wants it his way. And he gets away with it in Ukraine. But you may know this, you may not. Censorship in Ukraine right now, if you're not part of his political party, is at an all-time high. You can't leave the country if you're an opposition politician without his permission, and they don't give permission. They're all captives inside the country right now. And there's a reason for that, because Zelensky doesn't want people going outside of the country, talking to Washington, talking to UK, London, talking to France, because some of the barnacles will start to show. And so it's all politics there right now. But Trump says, no, we can't let politics get in the way. I'm going to force everybody to do what's in their own best interest. And so he thought he had the deal done on Friday. It didn't. It came undone. Everybody was crowing in Europe last weekend. But think of what they said. They're going to provide security guarantees to. That's what they told Zelensky this weekend. Well, the security guarantees they implied were military. Not necessarily weapons, but military. What does that mean? That's the back door into NATO, which they said they wouldn't do. So there's no thinking in the Europeans. You got a mishmash of 32 countries. They all have their own opinions. There's only one thing they're united on. They want to be the lead, not Donald Trump in the United States. But they can't be the lead. They were able to do that with Biden because Biden was weak. They can't do that with Trump. And Trump is committed, because he ran on this, to end the war. And so he wants to get to a ceasefire.
Okay. Paul Manafort, thank you for sharing the kind of inside understanding of what was going on and why. I appreciate you. When we learn more, please come back again and help us understand what the next piece of this is.
Anytime. Thank you.
All right. I appreciate you. Thank you for doing it. Paul Manafort. I told you he knows what's going on inside and what the thinking of it is. All right. So you got that take now. OK, 4 minutes, 35 seconds. Now, we want to take on a couple of subjects, okay? We want to look at the political play here on this and how Manafort's theory of it holds up under political scrutiny. But also, are we really getting transparency? I was disappointed by the UFO stuff. I thought the Trump administration was going to give more. I don't know what's going to happen with the Kennedy stuff. I thought it was going to come out anymore already. The Epstein stuff is even more confusing. Why did the AG, who I believe, I don't have anything against AG Bondi, okay? She's new. I don't have any reason to be against it, but this situation doesn't make any sense. They give phase one. Now they say that everything was being held back. Why didn't they deal with that before they gave us stuff that they knew wasn't what we were waiting for? We discuss after this.
Address to Congress, starting at 8/7 Central, a special edition of Cuomo. Stephen A. Smith and Bill O'Reilly join Chris Cuomo, setting the stage for President Trump's highly anticipated remarks.
We lay it out so you can understand the complexity of the sides.
Then stay with News Nation as Leland Vittert takes you through what's next for the nation. The presidential address to Congress. Special coverage begins tomorrow at 8/7 Central. News Nation, news for all Americans.
All right, let's just bring in the guests. Geraldo Rivera is with us. I feel like we should call him our editor at large, right? Because he's always like helping us shape and understand what we're going to report to you. And Republican member of Congress, Tim Burchett from Tennessee. It's good to have you both. Thank you, Representative. Always good to see you, Geraldo. So let me get a quick beat on Ukraine, and then I want to talk Epstein, because the Epstein thing, I don't understand, Tim, and that's why I wanted you here. Geraldo, let me start with you about Ukraine. I don't know about Manafort's theory that the Democrats got Zelensky all pissed off because they wanted to submarine Trump. I don't know about that part of it, but do you think that Zelensky will get the message that he needs to come back and be nice to his benefactor, and that Trump actually does have a plan here to get this to a better place?
No matter what else I have to say, I have to advise Zelensky to swallow his pride, apologize to anybody from the president on down who needs apologizing to. They have to reverse this cataclysmically horrible decision to cut off military aid to a country that is under attack by our sworn enemies, the Russians. This is a terrible, terrible result. I think that it was an ambush, and I think that J.D. Vance and the president were lying in wait for Zelensky, but that has nothing to do with my advice. He still has to swallow his pride. He has to apologize. Now, Manafort, the spin he put on it, remember, Manafort worked for the other side against the Zelensky party when he was an advisor to the Russian-oriented government in Ukraine. Manafort is a pro-Russian guy. He may be leading the president's advice, but there's no doubt that Manafort is almost a plant in this. Zelensky now is embattled. His nation is hanging on. I appeal to everyone with a sense of decency not to withdraw arms from the person we have and the nation we have been allied with for these several years. This is a horrible result. I am so embarrassed, but it doesn't matter. Zelensky must apologize to Trump. I have been with the president many times, particularly 2018, Puerto Rico, when the governors, the mayors of Puerto Rico insulted President Trump, who was making a historic visit there during Hurricane Maria. As a result of them insulting him, I think that's why he did not enthusiastically embrace the aid to Puerto Rico. President Trump is very transactional. Yeah. Whatever he has in his mind for negotiating, I don't know, but Zelensky must apologize to Trump and swallow his pride and apologize.
Tim, I don't think Trump can just unilaterally cut off aid that is congressionally approved. Do you think that this is a tactic, or do you think this is a situation where Congress is going to have to get involved and say, we decide what money they get, not you?
Well, I'm not sure of that, because, a lot of it that President Biden had done by executive order, and I never thought in my lifetime I'd be on the television with Geraldo Rivera. I always remember as a kid, he got into a fight on one of his TV shows, and he was bleeding, and he goes, it was a righteous fight. And remember, my daddy, an old World War II Marine, said,
he was fighting Nazis.
Yeah, well, Dad was fighting Japanese, but Geraldo was fighting. I don't remember who Geraldo was.
He was fighting Nazis.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Geraldo was fighting Nazis.
I know it's a family show, but my mama had lost her brother fighting the Nazis, so we don't particularly care for them very much either. But my daddy was always a fan of yours, Geraldo, so that says something. And Cuomo, I don't know. I love you. I don't know why, but I do. I guess it's just because I'm trying to be a Christian. I'm not sure. But the one thing that people are missing on this whole deal was, the deal on the rare earth minerals is something I think we should look at, because where the rare earth minerals are is in a combat area. And so we were going to put American corporations there. And in reality, that would Putin would not want to be lobbing missiles or having any kind of fight there.
Exactly.
So there was really something going on behind the scenes, which I thought was pretty crafty on Trump's part.
Smart move.
Yeah,
Smart move.
I just the whole thing's a nightmare. I've never voted for a penny for it. I think, it's Europe's war. I know y'all don't agree with me on that, but that's my opinion. And I'm just, this thing is a debacle. I think Zelensky needs to get back over here as fast as possible and make peace. And I just want the killing to stop. I'm tired of the war machine, the war pimps at the Pentagon, people on both sides of the aisle. have stock. It's public record. You can go look it up. Who has stock in the missile defense companies, and it's got to stop. My dad used to say, old men make decisions and young men die, and you're seeing a lot of young men on both sides die. And that ain't.
I don't disagree.
I can always remember when I was a kid, it's the Democrats who are against war, and now it's the Republicans. I guess it's kind of a role reversal. But I say my mama would cry every time they play that national anthem because she lost her brother Roy fighting the Nazis, and Daddy, you never woke him up. He never had any scars from the Pacific, but they were all internal. You never woke him up except by his big toe because he might wake up on one of those islands, and that's a true fact. And this thing has just gone on too long, and we need to put it to rest.
Let me ask you something else, Tim. I appreciate the analysis and your family's experience with it, and it's certainly something we have to end. I want to shift topics to Epstein. I don't understand what happened.
Yeah.
Whether it's the Southern District or the FBI or somebody hid stuff, it still doesn't make sense. So she sent a note saying, and again, I'm not impugning AG Bondi. That's not what I'm doing. They put out phase 1. She then says a whistleblower told me you were hiding things. What I don't understand is why would they have ever released stuff that they knew was going to be so unsatisfying, that they knew we already had known about? Why release it at all? Why not just track down whatever this whistleblower said and whatever this rumor is that led to the FBI chief of the New York office getting fired today? Why not track it down and then have real transparency? What do you
I'll
make?
go out on a limb here and say that thing was botched. She should have never opened her dadgum mouth and said, I'm sitting here bragging, this thing's on my desk. And all she had allegedly was some very limited records. I think the thing was botched. I think somebody's in over their head. Yeah, somebody's going to lose their job. Dadgum, they should. But I don't think it'll get as high as it needs to. And that's why nobody trusts these things. Nobody trusts this swamp that is actually a sewer. And that's Washington, D.C., because of crap like this.
Geraldo, give me a quick take. You've been dealing with disclosures.
I hear you.
I know, I hate that you told me, but I hope you're wrong still. Geraldo, give me a quick take. You think that they're going to find that there were files held by New York that they can now release?
I think the notion that there are Epstein files is as vacuous and empty as my putting my faith in Al Capone's vault. It is absolutely, there is no Epstein file other than what we know. The names are all revealed. It was AG Bondi was talking through through the top of her hat. Good FBI agent, the agent in charge, has lost his job behind this. This is the same guy who resisted giving up the name of the FBI agents who investigated January 6th. The same guy who refused to enthusiastically embrace Eric Adams, the mayor, after the dismissal of the charges against him. And now there are no Epstein files. It is all the fevered dream of the far right, the Alex Joneses of the world. It is like QAnon. There's nothing there that has not been revealed. I can give you 90 names right now. I can read them off right now. Just give me the sign. They've all been published before. We know the names. Right. This was a preposterous hype that she didn't check with the FBI to cover her tail. And I think as a result, she's been embarrassed. It is the unintended consequence is that the FBI has lost a very, very good agent in charge behind this absolute baloney. And I think a congressman who I am delighted with his family service, and my father also, a Master Sergeant in the United States Army. I appreciate that, but I also believe that, as the congressman said, AG Bondi was way over her head.
Well, let's see what happened. He said somebody, not AG Bondi. Tim, I appreciate you going on with Geraldo, and I think that it makes the point that you are about the people's business. You're about straight talk, not just pro forma politics and being in party all the time. Your country first. I appreciate you. Thank you for your Christian charity and grace that allows you to have affection for me. And Geraldo, I love you no matter what you believe. And I love that you brought that up about Capone's vote.
Both you guys. That's what I want to do.
You could not handle it. All right, just keep your coat on and stay where you're from. I got to go. Gentlemen, take care. Thank you both. 4 minutes and 30 seconds. All right. Measles. I know you're seeing on a lot of media tonight that another child died. that's not the case, okay? It was scary that an unvaccinated kid who was, of course, a Mennonite, remember, they don't believe in vaccines, but it raised this issue. And Bobby Kennedy has been speaking the measles now as the HHS guy and saying, well, it's a choice. Is that the right messaging? How concerned should we be about measles? And how concerned should we be about the people who are supposed to be concerned? Next. All right, we're on measles watch. The latest is there's several new cases reported in New York, very far from Texas, where we heard about the cases last week. And Secretary Kennedy is now urging a call to action, telling parents we have a shared responsibility to protect public health. He said, quote, vaccines not only protect individual children from measles, but also contribute to community immunity, protecting those who are unable to be vaccinated due to medical reasons. Sounds like what he didn't like saying about the COVID vaccine. Ironic. Dr. Deborah Birx, Trump's White House COVID response coordinator, joins us now. First, other than the Mennonite community who don't believe in vaccinations, do you believe that this is now reaching beyond and this is something that's going to be an increasing concern?
So there's always been measles all across the globe, and we've had constant introductions from people coming across the border or people coming to visit that have not been vaccinated for measles. So measles is constantly being introduced, but we've seen cases significantly increase last year and this year because our vaccination rates have just drifted down enough of that 1 or 2% less that is making a large number of individuals more vulnerable because you get local spread. Remember, 90% of the cases in Texas are in Gaines County or the immediate adjacent counties, and that's where we need to concentrate on vaccination. The New York is another introduction from global travel, someone coming over with measles. But because our vaccination rates have fallen over the last 4 years, I think due to misinformation about the COVID vaccine, people don't realize how protective and lifelong these children vaccines are. And just really quickly, 30% of the children under 5 are being hospitalized for significant disease in Texas. So I know every mom and dad out there doesn't want their child in the hospital. That is devastating to have 5-year-olds in the hospital and under.
And there's no reason not to take this vaccine.
So you saw that some of the people who are sick got vaccinated. So that's why we need to have everyone vaccinated in such a high percentage, because we do know that there's children that are either born at low birth weight, were in the neonatal intensive care, or have severe asthma or sickle cell disease. They don't make as good of immune responses. So it's our obligation for our children, our healthy children. We should be so happy that our children are happy, get them vaccinated, and protect those children around them that may have gotten the measles vaccine but didn't develop an effective response. We can do that. We've done that for several decades, protected the vulnerable children among us by getting vaccination rates over 95% in the healthy children.
Give me a quick take. Is it cause for optimism that Bobby does not sound like the Fauci book Bobby or the podcast Bobby when he's talking about vaccines here?
To me, I thought his op-ed was incredibly balanced. He put out all the facts and figures. He clearly has done the research. He's been well briefed. He understands that most of the people hospitalized this go around as opposed to last year, where they did put half of the people in the hospital to isolate them because they were in multifamily households in immigrant communities and they were trying to decrease spread. This time, however, these children are really sick. That are being hospitalized. And so he put all that information out there because he believes once Americans see that information, as he has seen the information, that they'll want to get their children vaccinated.
Dr. Birx, always a pleasure. Thank you for the quick hit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll keep talking as we get more data. Appreciate you. And I also wanted to put it out there in that context because a lot of people thought that Bobby would get in and he'd start talking all crazy. This time he didn't. 4 minutes and 15 seconds. Up next, my family made news this weekend. What is it, and what does it mean to me, and what does it mean to us? Next.
Huntington's disease. Pay close attention to and call your doctor if you become depressed, have sudden changes in mood, or have suicidal thoughts. Don't take if you have liver problems, are taking reserpine, tetrabenazine, or valbenazine. Austedo XR may cause irregular or fast heartbeat or abnormal movements. Seek help for fever, stiff muscles, problems thinking, or sweating. Common side effects include inflammation of the nose and throat, insomnia, and sleepiness.
Ask your doctor for Austedo XR.
My brother Andrew is running for mayor of New York City. Let me say what is obvious. I am not going to cover the mayor's race for New York City here on NewsNation. In fact, I've never really covered a mayor's race as I cover national and not local news. But clearly, I need to say this because clearly there would be a conflict. Therefore, I'm not going to discuss his campaign or the Democratic primary. Simple enough. I know you get it, okay? But this is something that I need to say, all right? I'm also not running the campaign, no matter what you hear, okay? I am not doing anything with the campaign other than what I've always done, which is to be there for my brother. Being Andrew's brother, being about my family has always been what matters most to me, as it does to you as well, I am sure. All right? But we all know how I got here. So I went to my bosses, I told them what was going on, I asked them what they wanted from me and what they didn't want from me, and to be fair, they're actually much more accepting of the situation than I expected, and that I am myself, okay? I love my brother. I believe in my brother. He is tough, and he has been tested. He'll run, and the people will decide as it should be. And that's all I have to say about it. I appreciate you hearing me out. I appreciate my bosses being upfront with me about it and being as accommodative as they have. I am a lucky, lucky guy. I work for great people who support me, and they were my friends first before I worked for them. And I appreciate it. And I appreciate you listening to me. It'll be the last you hear from me about it. We'll be right back.
5 years, the MDA community has pushed the science,
shifted the narrative,
and established the field of neuromuscular medicine.
And until that day when this is all a thing of the past,
you couldn't stop us if you tried.
Join us and celebrate 75 years of breakthroughs at MDA75.org.
We asked parents who adopted teens to share their journey.
We just kind of knew from the beginning that we were family.
They showcased a sense of love that I never had before. I mean, he's not only my parent, he's like my best friend.
At the end of the day, it's all been worth it. I wouldn't change a thing about our lives.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. Visit adoptuskids.org to learn more. Brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
Wrinkles, gray hair, and hearing loss are common signs of getting older. But being short of breath, having tightness in your chest, coughing, and wheezing are not. If you are experiencing these symptoms, you may be one of the millions of people who are living with a condition called COPD but don't know it. Early diagnosis and treatment can add years of better breathing to your life. For more information, talk to your doctor and visit copdfoundation.org today.
I'm looking at my messages. You didn't have to say anything. Yeah, I did. Oh, but this is great. Your father was a mayor. No, he wasn't. My father, Mario, was governor of New York. That's why it was weird that he was the 52nd and Andrew was the 56th. Although I will tell you this, my father ran for mayor in 1977 and lost. Won in a long line of losses. But I'll tell you what was interesting about that race. Ed Koch wound up being the mayor, a legend in New York City politics. The mood was very similar.